talking with the experts.
My guest is Kari Sutton in episode 277.
And that's, again, when I come back to talking about how do we raise our kids, what they do. So the model or brain, here's our prefrontal cortex. Particularly when they're little, our kids, their prefrontal cortex isn't as developed. So if we say something to them in that 0 to 12-year age range, and they'll take it in as a sponge. So even if it's a throwaway line, oh, you're so thick, if they hear that over and over again, that then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where they play it in their mind. Oh, mum says I'm really thick about maths or this or that or whatever it is, or I'm not good at. And this is one of the things we tried when I was a teacher, and we're trying to talk to families about, because if particularly women were saying, oh, go speak to your father, not so good at the numbers, because that then becomes, oh, mum's not good at numbers, I'm not good at numbers either, particularly for girls. So,
are you a non-techie, introverted author, speaker, coach, consultant, or entrepreneur wanting to make an impact through podcasting? In 30 days working one-on-one with you, I can show you how to build authority and credibility for your business. I'm inviting you to shift your thoughts about podcasting and allow yourself to expand into the next level of your life and business by joining the Podcast Wizard 30-day program as I help you take your podcast from idea to launch. Find it at rose-davidson.com under the Work With Me tab.
Welcome to Talking with the Experts. This is where we discuss great ideas to take your business to the next level. How do we know these ideas work? Well, it's because we're talking with business owners who are using these ideas. Business owners who have years of experience and expertise. All things business by business owners for business owners. And now, here is your host, Rose Davidson.
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. I'm your host, Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com. Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners, and you can find it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. And today it's my very great pleasure to introduce you to Kari Sutton, and we're going to be discussing building resilient kids. And many parents in business are concerned that they aren't doing a good enough job. Yeah, and I was one of them. I especially and Kari especially discusses how it's okay to be good enough, and that you don't always have to be right and get everything perfect. It's about reassuring your kids that they are actually great role models, and that you are actually doing a great job as a parent, despite the mistakes that you might make along the way. Good afternoon, Kari. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Rose, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So you are an educator, speaker and author who has helped over 25,000 kids, parents and educators with education-based strategies, tools and approaches to foster children's positive mental health, something that's very much needed in today's climate, I believe.
Yeah, if you look at it, unfortunately, I guess where my journey started, I was a teacher and educator, and I really became concerned, as well as a guidance counsellor and deputy principal. So that career, and I looked at it and went, something's going wrong. We're not tapping into, as Desmond Tutu said, we need to stop pulling people out of the river. We've actually got to go upstream and figure out what's going on, why they're falling in. Our kids are being faced with a tsunami of mental ill health at the moment, whether it be anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, self-harm. And it really worried me that particularly for parents in business and parents around the world, what can we do to tackle that problem?
Yeah, it's been escalating over the years, and I think the pandemic has just consolidated those mental illnesses amongst children being in lockdown and not being able to see their friends and go outside and play and do all those other things that they're so used to doing. How do we as parents help our children through that?
I guess, and that's one thing, is at least the people tuning into your podcast and yourself, you've actually recognized that there is a problem. So identifying that maybe something might be going wrong, or being aware that those issues are out there. That's one of the first things. So awareness, but also as we mentioned, or you mentioned at the beginning of the package, it's about knowing that good enough really is good enough. Sometimes mac and cheese at night, or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or whatever it is, Vegemite on toast, that's okay. It's what you do the majority of the time, not what you do when you've got to get a product out the door, or you've got to produce these content, or whatever it is that you're doing. It's actually knowing, what I do the majority of the time is actually what my children will grow up with, and particularly in their early childhood years. And that's why when I was writing the book about raising a mentally fit generation, it's talking about what can we do for kids in that 0 to 8, 0 to 12 age range to give them the good role models. And so the people in business that you're talking to and that we talk to on a daily basis, whether they be in corporate jobs or wherever, people are worried that they're not doing enough. People are worried that, I spend all this time. If you're being a good role model, if you're actually doing things like, and I know it sounds crazy, but it's getting enough sleep so we're not angry, or those sorts of things. It's actually taking care of ourselves. How do we demonstrate to deal with big emotions? How do we actually make that time for connection? Because unfortunately, these days, these things come between us and our kids some of the time. And what we really have to do is look and go, how can we help our kids develop the strategies? Because Rose, when you and I went to school, it would have been, we go home, the door shuts, and we keep the world out. So the bullying didn't come home with us. We might have replayed it in our minds, but it's nothing like social media these days, where Snapchat or whatever these things, they can get inside your home. And so it's knowing and saying, how do we help our kids develop the skills and tools they need to deal with that?
Yeah, I agree totally. I mean, when I was bringing my kids up, we owned a fish and chip shop on the Gold Coast, and it was 10 years of, and I was raising 3 kids and running a shop and actually working out in corporate as well, full time, going to school.
Wow.
I went 3 times, and, I beat myself up for a long time, a lot of years, to say, I didn't do a good enough job. But my kids are all, really nice adults, caring, kind, and, they're the things that I gave them, the tools that I gave them to be functioning adults in this world. So, I stopped beating myself up a little while ago, because, even though I did make a lot of mistakes, I drank too much and, was loud and all sorts of things. But, all in all, they were fed, they were clothed, they didn't want for anything at all, even if I had to go into debt to buy it, school excursions or whatever, the latest ModCon, that kids had to have. So I did a good job, despite the fact that.
And you are, and that's the business owners, like people tuning in to listen to you, everybody is doing as good a job as they can. And what we need to realize is the self-compassion piece, particularly, because I call it this itty-bitty shitty committee that sits on our shoulder and whispers in our ear, and it constantly says, Mary, you're not doing a good enough job. What thinks you? And all, you're going to be damaging them for life. Actually, no. There's that whole self-compassion piece, because when we can demonstrate self-compassion as adults and parents for ourselves and go, you know what, sometimes, guys, it's been a really crap day and all I want to do is go hop in a bubble bowl, go have some quiet time. And that doesn't mean I have to lock myself in the toilet, because sometimes with small children, that's what you actually have to do. Just go, I just need 5 minutes.
I just need 5 minutes.
That's right, 5 minutes. Lock the door to the bathroom and go, I really just need 5 minutes. And it is going, you know what? Having that self-compassion piece and understanding I am doing a good enough job, it is okay, because ultimately we are so hard on ourselves. And if our kids see us being hard on ourselves, then that's much more likely that they will then be hard on themselves. And in life, we are all doing the best job we can. And it's nice for our kids to go, you know what, it doesn't always work out. I remember mum and dad, like what their memories are, that things didn't always go to plan, and that was okay, that they lived through it. Because what we're doing for our kids at the moment is we're holding them in a safe space. So if you've got kids at home and you're growing them up at home, you're holding them in that safe space. So when they experience those disappointments, because I don't know if you've experienced it as well, I've seen it in kids' schools that I go to, grandparents' day, you just look at it and go, not everybody wins a prize, but everybody is winning a prize at the moment. And that is actually,
Oh, that's so wrong. I don't like that. I
Yeah,
don't like
no.
that concept at all. I think, if you're going to win a prize, you need to work for it rather than just be handed to you, because what's that teaching you? That you don't need to work.
And that's not what life is like. There, we will all get passed over. You might get passed over for a promotion. You won't win a tender that you're bidding for. You may not get the job that you go for the interview for. You may not get the first job that you go for. And those are the things that kids actually need to go, and that's why it's so important for them to experience at home, because research, when they're at home, they're supported, and you can sit with them. You may not sit with them, but you might sit with them over a cup of hot Milo or whatever. You actually go, you know what, you're going to live through it. I know it doesn't feel like it at the moment. I know it feels earth-shattering and horrible and like your heart is going to break into a million pieces, but it will get better. And research from overseas, particularly in Harvard and Yale, excuse me, they asked freshmen who came into university, what do you wish your parents would have given you? Now, these kids are from very well-off families. Their university fees are being paid for. They've gotten into great schools. And what they said after being there for 3 to 6 months, what I actually wish my parents had taught me and given me more of was more ability to deal with loneliness, disappointment, failure, because at the moment, we don't have that bond around us. We don't have those people right there, and we don't know how to deal with it. And so what they were finding was, when they were disappointed, there is no parent to come in and go, come on, my child deserves an A. And I, as a teacher, I've been in those situations where I've had a parent going, all right, well, what can we do to get them an A? They need to work a bit harder. Well, no, they did work hard. Well, it's really hard to explain to parents who are used to, and often, and I don't like the term, but we call it lawnmower parents, where they mow everything down and all of those things. We don't want to be that for our kids, because if we are doing those things, you have kids who will not be resilient and who'll break or crack at the first sign of things not going their way.
Yeah, I noticed because my kids were always so good, and we had a really open relationship, and they could come and talk to me about anything. But we went next door to the neighbour's 18th birthday party, and it wasn't a very nice day, but they'd made a tent sort of thing so that we could all be protected from the rain. And every time we went outside, the kids would go inside. Every time we went inside, the kids would go outside. So we just made a thing, we just stopped them and said, why do you keep leaving the room or where we are? Because, we start to feel like, we've got BO or something. And they said, because we don't know how to talk to adults. Our parents don't speak with us. And this was like 15 years ago. And I thought, even then, that really alarmed me that these 18-year-olds had never sat down and had an honest conversation with their parents. And, after we'd sort of, made a big thing about not being spoken to at this party, we had a great time. And the kids just opened up about so much that they should have been talking to their parents about and weren't. And I thought, what a sad state of affairs if you can't go to your parents if you're being bullied or you've been sexually assaulted or whatever. They just didn't speak to their parents. And I found that totally amazing.
Yeah. And that's one of the things where these days, and seriously, it could be, I know our phones, I know our devices get in the way. It may even be where, and I've set up with some things with teenagers where I say to families, it can be that your kid texts you and say, hey, I need to chat, or can we do this over? Because sometimes, as I've said to families, when Mitchell was growing up, it used to be the best time to talk about things that were most probably a little difficult. It may be that when we were driving in the car, so that we were eyes straight ahead, didn't have to look at all those sorts of, but exactly as you were talking about just then, it's the little things that become the big things. So it's the little times where you actually stop and engage and go, hey, how's it going? And sometimes Mitchell and I used to sit back to back where we didn't, because growing up, it's not cool to talk to a family member or whatever, but it's always making that time. And that has to start in early childhood as well. It can be developed in teenagers, but it really needs to have, because ultimately those, and I know sometimes it's really difficult with families because you think, oh, one more thing, but those little things for small kids are actually their big things. It's what's important to them. So talking about how they saw the bird fall out of the tree, or that this happened or that happened, that's when they know, oh, mum or dad or they want to listen to me, they value my opinion, and they'll be there when I have big problems. Because unless, and I bet my bottom dollar, Rose, you actually had that throughout your kids growing up. It didn't just start in teenagerhood. You had those connections where they knew they could come to you.
Yeah. I think in our era, though, the most harm that was ever done was television with the Brady Bunch. Every girl wanted to grow up to be Mrs. Brady. And when we weren't Mrs. Brady, when we had our own children, we thought we were failing because, you know, she was just perfect. And you know, and motherhood, I mean, parenthood does not come with a license. It doesn't come with an instruction manual. And you can Google till your bloody heart's content, but it's how you feel as a person that ultimately brings out the best in your children. And if you don't feel good about yourself, then your children aren't going to feel good about themselves, because they're going to mirror the things that you portray to them, even if you're doing it subconsciously.
And that's, again, when I come back to talking about how do we raise our kids, what they do. So the model or brain, here's our prefrontal cortex. Particularly when they're little, our kids, their prefrontal cortex isn't as developed. So if we say something to them in that 0 to 12-year age range, and they'll take it in as a sponge. So even if it's a throwaway line, oh, you're so thick, if they hear that over and over again, that then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where they play it in their mind. Oh, mum says I'm really thick about maths, or this or that, or whatever it is, and or I'm not good at. And this is one of the things we tried when I was a teacher, and we're trying to talk to families about, because if particularly women were saying, oh, you know, go speak to your father, not so good at the numbers, because that then becomes, oh, mum's not good at numbers, I'm not good at numbers either, particularly for girls. So when we will look at it and say, okay, how do we view ourselves as parents? How do we portray ourselves? And it's not that we're portraying ourselves, it's just that what's going on, this is the limbic system of the brain and the amygdala, and that's often where memories are stored. And what it becomes, and I have a sticker on my fridge that says I open my mouth and my mother comes out sometimes. Very embarrassing. And what happens is, it is because particularly in times of high stress, if we're tired, anxious, we will revert to parenting how we were parented. And so that's why our parenting matters so much. When we connect with our kids, like you did with yours, instead of having kids who don't know how to connect with adults, your children, as you said, they're kind, they're loving, they're empathic, they're generous. These are things you instilled. They would have been values in your own home and in your own life. And the kids, again, they'd see how you were in the fish and chip shop. They'd see how you were in your business or in your corporate life. And this is why because business is a trying time. And particularly in the past 2 years, how did we respond? How did we deal with our really big feelings? The level of anxiety in society has dramatically risen because of these 2 years where we have been locked down, where all of these things have been happening. And it has been unprecedented times. But what have we been modeling for our kids?
Yeah, well, kids, it's monkey see, monkey do, isn't it? It's not the other way around. It's, you know, and when you say to your kids, don't do what I do as I say, it's, you know, confusing.
Yes, very confusing, because 99.999% of the time they will do what they see, not what you say.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. I can so relate to that totally. Now, tell me a little bit about your book, Raising a Mentally Fit Generation. And it was you did that back in 2020.
Yes, I launched it in 2020. So looking at it, it was actually looking and saying, instead of, and I don't know if you've heard of Gus Worland as well. I did research back, and this was before Gotcha for Life. Well, it was still coming into terms, but I've used the term mental fitness or raising a mentally fit generation, because I don't actually like when we say mental illness or mental health, we often think about mental illness. So if I said, oh, somebody's their mental health, it will frequently go, we've been so conditioned in society to go, oh, mental health, poor mental health, not proactive and positive mental health.
It's still got such a stigma around
Yeah,
it.
it really does. And I want to actually think about, mental fitness is just like physical fitness. We can work on that. We can develop kids' mental fitness just like we can develop their physical fitness. So just as important as eating fruit and vegetables for our bodily health and getting physical exercise, there are things we can actually teach our kids, like optimism, hope, and the skills of emotional intelligence, resilience, empathy, kindness. These are things that can be taught. And I know it sounds crazy to teach this stuff, but we can actually also teach them to be happy more than they are pessimistic. And it's not about, oh, this toxic, because I don't like toxic positivity. It's not, oh, think happy thoughts all the time or be positive all the time. No, life isn't about that. Life is like this. And we need to teach our kids to, as I said to you at the beginning, the kids who'd gone, or these young people who'd gone to Yale and Harvard, what had happened is they hadn't been taught to deal with what happens in the dips.
Yeah, that's
so
exactly right. Yeah.
Often when they hit those dips, it's like, mum and dad aren't here to sort it out for me. They can't they can't wander in and defend me. What do I do? And I'm not having a go at parents. Again, I firmly believe parents are doing the best they know how to do with the tools they've got. It's just learning and saying, how can I give my child hope? Because ultimately, if a child or a young person doesn't have hope for the future, that's when suicidal ideation becomes more likely and self-harm becomes more likely, because all of us, and that's why lockdown was so hard, an extended lockdown, particularly in Melbourne in Australia, that extended lockdown of when do we get it, like that hope, it's light at the end of the tunnel, knowing something better is coming. So how do we do that? How do we teach our kids to be more grateful? What are the activities? So the book was about taking those 10 components and looking and saying, how, giving them, again, I'm really practical. I love things that are practical. Love ideas that people can take and use immediately in their lives and say, oh, wow, yes, we can do those things, and things that don't cost a lot of money, because people don't have a lot of money. So it's looking and going, what can people do on a daily basis? Because again, I'd love to lift weights and go to the gym once and look like Thor or look like Michelle Bridges or things like that. So have the wonderful body. It's not, you don't do that with your physical fitness. And that's what it's like with mental fitness as well. And I know Gus Warland is talking more about this now, about what are we doing to have our men, particularly in Australia and regional and rural remote and in business, how can we build mental fitness or that resilience in? And how can we talk about this more often? Because ultimately, building mental fitness in children, it's just like building physical fitness. We need to have, whether it's a gratitude jar that they keep, or a journal, or whether it's understanding, okay, and it's interesting. And you asked, where did it come from? In 2003 and 4, I started studying with Martin Seligman, and he's a founder of positive psychology, or he brought it all together and coined that term. And I guess what I was, at the time I was a teacher and I was struggling, and I was saying to him, Martin, I'm seeing this rise in depression. And that was even in 2003 and 4. And he said, Kari, we could halve the rates of, I said, you could halve the rates of depression. How could you do that? He said, if you caught children's negative self-talk when they first started talking, because what happens is, if you think about it, 3 and 4 years of age, they'll say, oh, I'm really dumb about that. Because they've not learned, as they get to 6 and 7 and they go to school, they look around and go, nobody else is saying that. So what happens is it becomes an internal voice. And that itty bitty shitty committee now has that playing in their heads. And he said, if we could nip negative self-talk in the bud at 3 and 4 and 5 years of age, where they didn't think that for the rest of their lives, it would stop, like it would halve depression. And that's where I thought, so I started doing that stuff at schools and looking at what we were doing. But that's where it came from, Rose, because ultimately, I think, as you said so powerfully at the beginning, we are children's most important role models. Parents are children's most important and vital role models. And what we show our kids, or what we teach our kids, by how we live our lives, by what we talk to them about, by being available for that connection, that's the most important part.
Yeah, I so totally agree with you. And yeah, I tried to raise my kids with those very values totally, because I wanted them to not grow up like I did in a disjointed, dysfunctional house. So yeah, I think it worked for the most part anyway. Kari,
it sounds like it did because you've got a grown adults. Have you got grandchildren now?
I unfortunately won't have grandchildren. My daughters would eat them. And my son, his partner has a genetic condition that is hereditary, so I won't. I've got fur babies, so
and that is okay. But they are kind, compassionate, and this is because a lot of families and parents are saying to me, "Oh, we're not going to have grandkids." That's okay, because again, being okay with people's decisions about that's their decisions for their life. And look, Oprah doesn't have kids, she doesn't have grandkids, but the powerful impact she has on people's lives, because often people say, no, be okay with their decisions, be okay with that.
I am. My son recently got married, and his partner, because of this genetic, she's got a learning disability, and because she couldn't spell my son's last name, he decided to change his name to her name.
Wow, how lovely.
Yeah, and we were quite shocked because we didn't know about it until the wedding day. And I was a little bit upset because he hadn't discussed it with us. But then I thought, no, he's doing it. He's done it for the right reasons, because his partner couldn't, write his name. So, why not change his name to her name? And, I think that it just shows such empathy, such love.
Compassion. What a compassionate young man, what a compassionate man to do that. And an understanding young man, and somebody who loves his partner so unconditionally that's what would happen. That just makes my heart so warm.
And I'm so proud. And I've got goosebumps because I think it shows that, what can be done when you raise your kids right.
Very much so.
Kari, where can people find this book that we've just been discussing, or any other book that you've written?
So if you're looking at karisutton.com, or if they follow me on Insta, Kari Sutton at Insta, so Kari Sutton Insta, so that's my Instagram handle, because often I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, but more on Instagram, and it's just looking and saying, how can we help families, how can we help parents and families raise the best kids they can?
Yeah, it's so important now, I think, because the world is just moving so quickly, much more quickly than when we were kids. It seemed like an easy life, but the time just goes by so fast now, and things are changing. Technology's changing so much. It's hard to keep up. And as parents, even of adult children, you still need to keep those lines of communication open. Because, sometimes they do have shitty days as adults, and sometimes it's just nice to come home to mum or dad and say, look, I've had a really shitty day. Can you, just listen, even if you live miles and miles apart from each other. So,
that is critical, because I guess, and going back to why I wrote the book, I don't know, it would have been in around most probably 10 years ago now, unfortunately, a parent in the Upper Hunter. She was a mum of a 20-year-old, and she said, I saw him putting sunscreen on that morning, like he was a tradie, worked outside, and she said, I'll see you. And it was just before Christmas. Okay, we'll see you for dinner tonight. And unfortunately, that was the last time she saw him, because he took his own life. And she said, he knew how to take care of his body, to put sunscreen on and tonight, but he didn't know how to take care of his mind. And that exact thing, as you said, to have that ability to reach out to parents, to anybody, and go, you know what, I've had a really horrible day. I just need to talk to somebody. And that willingness and knowing that your life is worth something. We love you unconditionally. We care for you. We accept you. And we want to have that connection. That's what will keep our young people alive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kari, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. I do hope you'll come back on again another time and we can discuss this a little bit further, but we've unfortunately run out of time today.
Thank you, Rose, for having me. And I wish all of your listeners a wonderful day.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Talking with the Experts, hosted by Rose Davidson. Make sure you have a look at our back catalogue over at talkingwiththeexperts.com, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any episode. We look forward to your company next time. Talking with the Experts.